So, Moko is a game that's been out in early access for a little over a month at this point, and I've been playing it ever since. I also played Moko during the limited beta back in 2023, and even made a video on it. A video that I honestly can't recommend because the audio is all kinds of screwed up, but anyway, I have a good bit of experience with the game. So in this video, I'm gonna discuss whether or not the game is worth playing. I'm already messing up the script. We're gonna see if the game is worth playing and if the game has the potential to be a success. One of the biggest charms that Moko has is that you cannot pay any money or any currency to gain power advantages for your character. Most other mobile games and even a few PC/console games implement monetization strategies that provide additional stat buffs for paying players. This system, while profitable for the most part, is often despised by gamers because of its predatory nature. I myself am not a fan of these kind of pay-to-win mechanics. Mobile games especially are notorious for implementing these practices, so to see one have it to where in-app purchases are cosmetic only is honestly a breath of fresh air. Additionally, Moko isn't as aggressive or in-your-face about its monetization as other mobile games. Have you ever opened up a game and get hit with a bunch of pop-ups containing special offers and bundles that cost real-life money? Or when you go to the game shop and it's just in-app purchase after in-app purchase after in-app purchase? Well, Moko isn't like that. You open Moko and you just get to play the game. There's no pressure to buy anything in the game, and even when you go to buy or browse the shop, the game doesn't litter your screen with in-app purchases. Also, the shop is very navigable too. Sometimes games will make the shop a freaking maze to get around by. It's honestly super weird, so I'm glad that Moko isn't trying to aggressively advertise the fact that you can spend money on the game. With that being said, there are a couple things that I really don't like about the game's monetization. Sometimes, when you go to the shop, you find a really cool cosmetic that you want to get, but you have to pay real money in order to obtain it. Not Mogold, the game's premium currency, but actual money. This happens more frequently than not, to the point where buying Mogul with real money seems kind of pointless. What's the point of doing so if the majority of cosmetics are locked behind a paywall? Well, there actually is a point, and it leads into the second issue of the game's monetization. Gacha. Now, a lot of people may disagree with me on this, but hear me out. Let's say you buy a snack from the vending machine, but instead of being able to choose which snack you get, the vending machine deploys a random in-stock snack. That's pretty much what these merch drops are. You spend Mogold on getting cosmetics that you don't necessarily want, but are stuck with anyway if the game gives it to you. This sucks. This really sucks in my opinion. I don't want to be spinning a slot machine in hopes of getting the outfit that I want. I'd rather not waste my time and buy the outfit up front. Like, I don't get why this is a thing. Especially considering that if you buy enough merch drops, you get everything included in it. So what's even the point of having this RNG feature in the first place? If it's to add excitement to getting new cosmetics, then it fails horribly because you're going to get everything eventually. It just makes the gacha pointless overall. Just let me buy what I want with Mogul, please. This is a really annoying feature that I hope gets changed sometime soon because I have yet to spend a single Mogold on these merch drops. They're awful. Now with that out the way, let's talk about the gameplay aspects. There are 4 different ways to play the game right now. 5 if you include the weekend events. The first of the 4, or 5, is the overworld, which I guess is the main way to play the game. It's basically what you'd expect from an MMORPG. You're in a world where you fight monsters with other players, but it's not always about fighting monsters. Sometimes you'll have to escort spirits or engineers across the map for XP. Sometimes Luna, who is basically the in-game manager of Moko, will pop up and you'll have to defend her for a certain amount of time. There's a bit of variety in the game's objectives, though I wish there was more. I want there to be more side objectives to the game, and while yes, there are the occasional events that appear in the world, most of them are very identical to each other. Also, the overworld worlds feel like they're the exact same, with the only difference being the monsters that spawn and the strength of those monsters. Even the maps look too similar to each other. Look at Cave of Spirits, for example, and compare that to the Summoning Grounds. They feel like the exact same map despite having different layouts, but even the layouts don't feel different enough because you just don't notice it in-game. The maps just don't seem to have an identity besides the environment. But even then, so many maps share an environment with others. I feel like the maps need to feel more different. Maybe add some stage hazards or points of interest that are unique to certain maps. It also doesn't help that these worlds, like I said earlier, have the same gameplay loop of fighting monsters and occasional escort missions. There needs to be more variety, not only in game design, but in aesthetic as well. Also, is it just me, or does farming the overworld eventually get unexciting? The gameplay gets monotonous and repetitive after a while. I know that we have quests that help motivate us to play, but the quests themselves don't make the game exciting, if that makes sense. I already mentioned that the devs can add more objectives and stage hazards to add variation to the gameplay. They can go a step further and do what almost every other MMORPG does. Add drop rates for special loot. I understand that Moko currently doesn't have a huge loot pool, but it would be so cool if they could make it to where bosses have the chance to drop loot specific to them. Like, imagine an Axe Hopper having a chance to drop an Axe Hopper helmet that we can equip on our character. Or what about a heart emote that gets sliced by an axe? Those are just a couple of examples, but so many MMORPGs have this kind of system in place. World of Warcraft, Diablo, RuneScape, all of these have drop rate mechanics that add excitement and replayability to the game. Hell, it doesn't even have to be an overworld exclusive thing, it can even apply to the other modes in the game. Speaking of the other modes, let's talk about rifts and dojos, which are practically the same thing except the former is multiplayer and the latter is single player. There are two kinds of rifts in my opinion. There are boss fights and monster arenas. Boss fights are pretty much dungeons from literally every other MMORPG. You team up with 3 other players to defeat a boss. Previously, boss fights used to be completely different in that you basically had to have a full team run the dearly departed Squid Blades, and that was just to complete the lighter rifts, let alone speedrun them. Now that we have the Jaded Blades, rifts are now more difficult. Well, why is that? Well, the goal of most rifts is to take down the boss at the end of the dungeon. The Squid Blades had an invisibility mechanic that pretty much made you undetectable by enemies until you attacked, which made rifts a lot easier to deal with because you didn't have to fight the monsters that blocked the path to the boss. You were practically skipping to the end of the level. Now that the Squid Blades are gone, you can no longer pull this off. This actually exposes a huge issue with rifts in my opinion. Most of the rift itself kind of feels like filler, if that makes sense. At least the ones that make you go through a bunch of monsters before fighting a boss. Think of Rage Room, Deep Gorge, Overlord's Chamber, for example. The main objectives of these rifts is to defeat the boss or bosses at the very end. The game doesn't care if you take down the monsters that come before it, so taking down the monsters kind of feels pointless. It's more of a false objective with little to no incentive for defeating them. It just feels unnecessary. I think to combat these kind of rifts, the devs should either make it to where you're only fighting the boss and no other monsters, or make it to where you have to defeat X amount of monsters to progress through the rift. Well, what about the other kind of rift? Monster arenas. Monster arena rifts basically throw a bunch of monsters at you, and you have to defend yourself or defend a point of interest for as long as possible. In the Street Fight Rift, you win by defeating 8 waves worth of monsters. In Van Defense, you have to defeat the waves of monsters while protecting the van in the middle of the map. Remember the Shotbow event? That's pretty much what Van Defense is, except you can play with any build you want in Van Defense. I think these are fine, admittedly. No one really talks about the Monster Arena rifts anywhere near as much as the boss fight rifts, but from what I've played in these events, they're actually pretty enjoyable. If I were to give any feedback, and honestly, it's not even about monster arenas, but rather rifts as a whole, there needs to be more variety in the objectives. We only have 2 types of rifts in the game right now, and when you have multiple rift stages, the objective eventually gets repetitive. What makes a boss fight like Hunting Party different from Dead End, the very first rift in the game? Other than the difficulty of the monsters, of course, but you know what I mean. There's no variety that gives each rift its own identity, aside from the monsters and the environment, but those aren't enough to really be impactful in my opinion. We talked a lot about rift issues, but what about dojos? I'll be completely honest, I think dojos are in a much better state than rifts. The way I see dojos are like personal challenges to test your own mechanical skill and adaptability to certain situations. Some dojos will throw at you bosses to defeat, which makes you want to use gear like the Spicy Dagger, Monster Taser, and the Jaded Blades, for example. Some dojos will throw at you just hordes of monsters that encourage you to run crowd control comps like Snow Globe and Techno Fists. It feels better than going into a rift with 3 other people, who may or may not be severely underleveled, and running the world's worst build known to man, and failing the speedrun or complete the rift because of it. Or failing to complete the rift because of it. Damn, talking is so hard. Anyway, with dojos, it's easier to understand what works and what doesn't. The only person to blame for a failed speedrun or dojo completion is you, so it feels better and easier to understand the game's mechanics. If I were to give any feedback on dojos other than Luna's bum-ass AI, it would be to give more objectives to complete in dojos. While dojos are varied in the monsters you fight, they're not varied in actual objectives. Now, take what I say with a grain of salt because I haven't completed a lot of the dojos, but I want to do more. Not just defeating all of the monsters on the screen. Make it like Monster Arena to where I have to defend myself for a point of interest for X amount of waves or Y amount of time. Give me more to do than just fighting monsters. Let's briefly mention Versus, because this is the worst of the 4 game modes in my opinion. It's just a mix of farming monsters and fighting enemies, and you can do it solo, duo, or in a team. This sucks, it's not fun at all, and it's no wonder the majority of the player base doesn't touch it. I think if Moko were to ever implement an actual PvP mode, it should be a full-on MOBA. Doesn't have to be crazy like League of Legends of course, but rather a bite-sized, slightly simplified version of it. The current Versus mode is like League of Legends, but without the towers, and everyone is playing jungle role. It's just not fun to me, but I do understand that PvP isn't the big selling point of the game, so it's fine, I suppose. Now, let's move away from the gameplay and talk about some of the other features. The social features of this game, in all honesty, are pretty lackluster. Chat rooms are insanely overwhelming. They're pretty much the clans feature of the game, which, side note, wow, Moko got a clans feature before Squad Busters. That game is such a joke. But anyway, you can have up to 1,000 people join for some reason. I think that's way too much. Sure, it may be cool for bigger content creators, but for us regulars, it's hard to manage the actual chat room and build connections there. The size of these rooms need to be toned down by a bunch, but I guess it's cool that you can join multiple chat rooms. That's a plus at least. Also, is it just me, or do people just not use emotes or greetings? I see them quite a bit in chats, but in-game almost no one uses them, especially the greetings. Every time I get a new greeting, I always question whether or not people even bother using them. I don't know what it is, or if the devs can even fix them. They just seem like they're there because they're there, and every game has to have these kind of emotes now. Thanks, Fortnite. Anyway, let's talk about the Elite Hunter program, the endgame content, as many say. Once you reach Hunter level 30 at the time of this video, you become Elite Hunter 1. As an Elite Hunter, you gain access to more rifts, dojos, worlds, versus maps, and more. You also get access to rings, which basically provide percentage buffs to certain stats. However, when a new chapter drops, the rings will go away, so they're only temporary additions to your gear. Honestly, there's not much else to really talk about for the Elite Hunter program. You get access to a bunch of Elite Hunter quests that reward Elite Hunter points that can be redeemed for loot at the Elite Hunter shop. I've been saying Elite Hunter a lot, but that's really it anyway. It's very bare bones, and honestly a very overhyped feature of the game. Sure, the rings are really cool, but when they start getting in the way of actual permanent progression like weapons, gadgets, and passives, they eventually become a bother to obtain because now, when you open Chaos Cores, you have a chance of leveling up your temporary rings instead of leveling up your other gears. It can get annoying sometimes because when the reset happens, and it will happen, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of gear power. It's going to set us back by a bunch and make it to where stages that were once possible because of the smart rings are no longer possible. It'll feel like we're going backwards, and that's never a good thing. It's kind of like reverse Prestige. It's going to feel terrible once it hits. Now that we're approaching the end of the video, it's time to revisit the question, is Moko worth playing? Of course it is. The game is in early access still, and while a lot of people are complaining about it, there actually is a reason for it being in early access, because, let's be honest, y'all would have complained even more if they released it the way that it is right now. Look at Squad Busters when it first launched. I think the biggest issue with Moko right now is how repetitive the game is. It feels like no matter what you're doing, you're always doing the same thing, just in a different coat of paint. This is something that I hope the developers are aware of and can improve on in the future, because looking online, that seems to be the biggest thing holding the game back according to fans and critics alike. If they can improve on that and add more mechanics, more objectives, and more content in general, then I think Moko has the potential to be big. Once those issues are fixed, as well as the other aforementioned issues, I think we're looking at the next big mobile hit. But what do you guys think? Is Moko worth playing at all? I think so, but hey, I'm only one player out of hundreds of thousands. Let me know what you want to see from Moko in the future. Thanks for watching, join Choco Champs if you're looking for a chat group, and as always, take care of each other and love each other. Peace.